Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Dose, and it is complete insanity on what Nintendo has pulled off this generation. Like, I get it. I know everybody wants to talk about the Switch too. We all want to see that console. I understand. I really do. I'm just as excited as everybody else, but let's take a moment here to just kind of really appreciate what the current Switch has done these past 7 years, because it is honestly crazy. And the thing is that this thing just continues to roll. We just got an update for how well it did last year in Japan, and it was complete domination, which becomes even crazier when you start to realize it beat out historical numbers by PlayStation. So we're going to talk about both of those today, because actually also big congrats to Sony as well. They had a rather impressive year themselves. So do make sure to stay tuned for all of that. But let's just go and get things kicked off today with an update for Starfield. This was easily by far the most polarizing game last year. And for whatever reason, the internet just melts every single time Bethesda and Xbox reveals that it had some success. After all, it did reach 13 million players. It sold a lot of early access copies. It was also very successful on Steam. Well, it's now been pointed out that Starfield is among the top best-selling games of 2023 on Steam by gross revenue. You can see here games like Baldur's Gate 3 made the list. Big congrats to Larian Studios. I mean, this is just so incredible to see a game like this sell so well. You know, the fact that Larian was nervous before launch because they were afraid that this game may have peaked in early access, I think that makes this accomplishment even more meaningful. Baldur's Gate 3 was not expected to be this massive success that it became, but they were rewarded for making a great game. So again, big congrats to Larian Studios. And then as you can see, you have Starfield. Now the reason that this is pleasantly surprising people is because this game launched directly into Game Pass. It's available on both console and PC Game Pass, and to see it still be among the best-selling games is incredibly impressive. You know, there's always that debate out there that goes around the games can't sell if they launch directly in the Game Pass. But this very much goes against that logic. This is another example that proves that narrative wrong. Starfield, in fact, made a lot of money on Steam, and this, of course, doesn't even include the money that they've made elsewhere. They sold more units on Xbox consoles, and then you have to kind of keep their subscriptions in mind as well. Microsoft, in fact, did previously say that Starfield helped Game Pass reach a new record for new Game Pass subscribers for a single day. So Starfield, by all metrics, appears to have had a lot of success for Microsoft. No, I don't think that this game is perfect, and I don't think it's the best game of the generation. I gave it an 8.5 myself, but the discourse for me, that's always been my sticking point. I think there's a lot of really disingenuous conversation that revolves around Starfield, and that's the thing that I kind of push back on. You know, they even go so far as to try to make it sound like this was some major flop, which is just not true. And this is just the latest metric that proves that, yes, it did have some success despite all the noise online. I also think that this is another example that makes it abundantly clear on why Steam is just so important to the Xbox ecosystem. Xbox has had a lot of success on the Steam platform with various different titles, and Starfield is really just the latest example. Now moving on though, we also got a release date for Sandland. They just dropped a new trailer today and announced that it will be available on April 26th, so go ahead and mark your calendars for that. Bandai Namco even put together a nice looking collector's edition, which is available on their website for $130. That edition is available for both Xbox and PlayStation 5. Unfortunately, there's no PC version, but overall, I mean, it's a nice little collector's edition if you want to get into all of that. Now, for those that are unaware, though, the reason that there's, I'll call it cautious optimism for Sandland, is because this is a game adaptation based on a manga series that was made by the creator of Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama. So, I mean, if you're a fan of his and his timeless art style, this is a game that's at least worth paying attention to. I'm still not 100% sold on his gameplay, but I do hope this game does well. I do like its art style, so I'm definitely crossing my fingers here. But I mean, I guess we're not going to have to wait too much longer. Again, it will release on April 26th. Okay, so let's go and talk about Nintendo, though. We actually have two different things to talk about here because they also just announced some of the most requested Game Boy Advance games on the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack service. They're finally hearing you Golden Sun fans out there, as you'll soon be able to play the first two games on your Nintendo Switch. They will finally be available to subscribers on January 17th. So, I mean, if you're looking for something to play here sometime soon, and I mean, even if you don't have that nostalgia factor for this series, I'd still recommend at least giving these games a try if you like JRPGs. They've aged incredibly well because they've always had just such an attractive art style. They do some really cool things with the camera angle and battle, and I mean, it really was a showcase for the Game Boy Advance and that art style when it originally released. I think even now, all of these years later, it still looks spectacular. So maybe give them a try when they release, and who knows? Maybe this could even be a new beginning for more entries in the future. Now, I'm probably getting my hopes up a little too much for that, but do keep in mind that it was just a few days ago that we actually discovered Nintendo is searching for more third-party partners to license their games out to. So, who knows? Golden Sun could actually have a chance with all of that going on. But either way, they will be available to Switch Online subscribers next week. Now, let's go and talk about the success that the Switch has had, though. I mean, all generation long, the Switch has been a powerhouse. It's right now currently the third best-selling console ever made with more than 130 million units sold worldwide, and it is still selling. One region that it's done particularly well in, though, is in Japan. It has been complete domination over there, and 2023, while there's been a lot of talk about the future and its successor and the Switch winding down, it's still absolutely dominated, both in terms of its hardware and in its software. Thanks to the Famitsu charts and reposted by Genki, you can actually see here that the Switch was once again the best-selling console in 2023, beating out the PlayStation 5 quite significantly. Sold an additional 4 million units, bringing the total to 31.7 million for that region. The only console to sell more in Japan is the Nintendo DS, which sold 32.99 million. So the Switch, I mean, it has a very good chance to make history in 2024 if it continues to sell at the pace that it has. A big part of that, though, of course, is its software. Nintendo, honestly, and I've said this before, and I'll just say it again here, Nintendo, honestly, they have just been killing it all generation, and even last year, they dropped several big games like Mario Wonder, Pikmin 4, and of course, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Well, if you look here, you can actually see the top 10 best-selling games in Japan for 2023, and every single game is on the Nintendo Switch. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom sold a massive 1.9 million units. Mario Wonder sold 1.5 million. And then Pikmin 4 finally got the recognition that it deserves as it sold 1.1 million. Here's the thing about all this, though. When you see all this, you know, it looks impressive and everything. Nintendo is completely dominating in every statistical category. But when you start to look at things a little bit closer, you start to realize that it's even more impressive than what you might initially think. Interestingly, the PlayStation 5 had an historical year in Japan. The PS5 ended up selling 2.58 million units in 2023, which is actually half of the total PS5 user base in that region. This also makes it the single best year they've had for a home console since the PlayStation 2 in 2004. And on top of that, this is also the best year they've had in total since 2010 with the PSP. So PS5, without a doubt, put up some extraordinary numbers last year. Big congrats to Sony. But even still, it didn't even come close to what the Switch is currently doing. To add to that, Sony did actually have a big exclusive in 2023, Final Fantasy 16. That's a huge franchise in Japan, and this might be the biggest surprise here. As big as this franchise is, Final Fantasy 16 did not crack the top 10 best-selling games in Japan. In reality, it wasn't even Square Enix's best-selling game, because Dragon Quest Monsters 3, a Switch exclusive, beat it out. It ended up selling 510,000 units. I think that is actually a little bit of a testament that the Western approach that Square Enix is taking with the Final Fantasy franchise isn't exactly connecting with their Japanese players. That might be something they need to consider for future titles, but hopefully as more PS5s are sold, Final Fantasy 16 will continue to sell well throughout the generation. I know not everybody liked its more action-driven direction, but I personally really enjoyed Final Fantasy 16. It was one of my favorite games last year, in fact. But I will, however, be interested in the direction they take for future titles, because again, not everybody was thrilled about the approach that they took. Nonetheless, though, I mean, all of these metrics right now makes it very clear in just how dominant Nintendo has been in Japan. I think it's honestly going to be crazy there once they do eventually announce the Switch successor. When you see things like this, I almost kind of wonder how long it'll take the Switch successor to outsell the PlayStation 5, even though it has a head start. Now, one last thing that I want to talk about here, though, is Sega. Last month at the Game Awards, they revealed their New Era campaign, which is them reviving several dormant franchises. So far, they've announced Jet Set Radio, Shinobi, Crazy Taxi, Streets of Rage, and Golden Axe. I think that this is incredibly exciting, especially if you grew up playing these old Sega consoles. The thing that was really interesting about this announcement, though, is that they did tease that there's more to come. So they do, in fact, have more revivals in development, and shortly after this announcement, several trademarks appeared online. That included games like Kid Chameleon, Alex Kidd, and even Altered Beast. So while that doesn't necessarily confirm anything, it is at the very least a good sign that they might be considering some of these franchises. Well, now, a new leak points to a couple of different titles that didn't appear on this list. So this is coming from Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson, which continues to be extremely reliable. Well, according to him, he's heard that Sega greenlit around 10 classic games back in 2020 and 2021. Even more so here is that he's heard that they've greenlit even more since that time. So we could actually get a mountain of classic revivals here in the next few years. And apparently, according to his sources, they understand that this will include Panzer Dragoon, Neon Genesis Evangelion, and Sakura Taisen. Now, I believe that's a part of the Sakura Wars series. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. But I think the big one here is Panzer Dragoon. This is a very well-regarded series, and I mean, if they do revive it, they have options. Most of the Panzer Dragoon games are rail shooters, very good ones at that. But then you have Panzer Dragoon Saga. That one was quite unique in the sense that it's the only turn-based game in the series, and it might not necessarily be the most successful game in the world, but the people who have played it seems to absolutely love it. So I do kind of wonder which direction they take with a new entry, but the last completely original Panzer Dragoon game that we got was Orta for the original Xbox. That's actually one of the best reviewed games for the original Xbox. So if they can revive the series with that type of quality, this could actually be a really exciting project. Nonetheless, though, I mean, if you grew up playing Sega games, the years ahead are going to be wild with all of these different revivals. And now that we're hearing that more than 10 games could be coming back, it honestly feels like pretty much everything is on the table right now. I'm currently thinking that Knights would be a cool series to bring back, but let me know what you all think about all this. Which franchise would you most like to see Sega revive? Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. We really got to talk about every console maker here today, including actually Sega as well, which is pretty cool. But until next time, peace out.